Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution. We are not here to suffer. We are here to flourish. We are here to thrive. And I believe that's true of each and every one of us. And I believe that within our spiritual teachings and practices, we have the tools and techniques to do that. Now, as I have grown and as I've had the honor and the privilege of traveling around the world and of being involved in developing countries, what is also very clear to me is that we're not all starting at the very same place. And that's also very true as I have put myself more deeply into learning about racial literacy. I know that we're not all starting at the same place. Even though we are not all starting at the same place, these principles and practices do work for us wherever we are starting from. I also believe wholeheartedly that we are each children of God, whether we recognize that or not, whether we affiliate with a formal religion or not, or even if we are on the spiritual path or not. What we are innately is an expression of the divine, no matter what we call that. And that we each have a light within us that we are meant to shine. I take very literally Jesus' words when he said that you are the light of the world, and when he said that our instruction was to let our light shine. I'm reminded of the ancient Greeks. In one of the very old Olympic races, there was a race that was not about who finished the race first, but the winner was the one who finished the race with their torch still lit. Is that not a beautiful image? I want to live my life that way. I want to live my life as best I possibly can, that when I have finished with my torch still lit. To me, that is living successfully, that is living joyfully, and that is living in a meaningful, purposeful way. So there are some ideas that I want to share with you this morning. 8 of them, actually, if I time myself well, I'll get to all 8 of them. But 8 of them that I see as being universal turning points on the path to successful, joyful, and purposeful living. The very first one is this: when we are willing to make mistakes and get up each time we fall. When we are willing to make mistakes and get up each time we fall. As very young children, we were much more willing to make mistakes than some of us are as adults. Think about, if you can remember your own experience of learning to walk, and if you can't, can you remember watching a child learn to walk? Do they do it right the first time? No, not if we define right as not falling. No, they stumble and they fall. I remember our son Jonathan. Even before he learned to walk, you learn to do what? Crawl. And his attempts at crawling was backwards. I thought, oh boy, we got a journey ahead of us. He is a black belt in Aikido now. He is an outstanding skier. He is learning to surf and is taking up scuba diving. The fact that he crawled backwards instead of forward doesn't make a difference, does it? We fall down so many times. It's not how many times we fall, it's are we still getting up? How many of you remember your first experience of driving a car? How was that? You may not remember, but I promise the person who is teaching you how to drive remembers, right? They remember. I remember the very first dress I sewed. I was all of 10 years old. I bought a 50-cent Simplicity pattern, and the cheapest fabric you could find. It was like a yellow sheet. And all this dress was a simple shift. No collar, sleeveless. Now I was 10. And it had these things called darts. And I had no idea what they were for. And I sewed one of them right side out and one of them inside out. And I looked at it and I said, that's not quite right. Years later, Not only did I make all of my own skating costumes, not only did I surprise my father and make a man's tailor jacket, and made the ordination dresses for 4 or 5 of my ministerial classmates, but you wouldn't have known it from that very first experience, right? You have those same stories as well. You have those same stories as well. We do not start at the top. We make lots of awkward and sometimes embarrassing, and depending upon what we're learning to do, maybe even sometimes painful times when we fall. But if we're about successful and purposeful and joyful living, we've got to be willing to make those mistakes and then get up each time we make them, whether it's a mistake in a relationship where we've had our heart broken, or a mistake in the way we've taken care of our bodies or not, to get back up and say, today, this moment, I start anew. I learned something from the past. The second turning point is when we keep learning and trying new things. One of the things I appreciate about my dad, when you lose a parent, those of you who have lost a parent, you probably find yourself reminiscing a bit, right? And my dad passed only a couple of months ago. And I find myself reminiscing. And there were a lot of things about my relationship with my dad as I got older that were very, very difficult. And man, did I have to do a lot of inner work to be able to have a meaningful relationship with him. A lot of forgiveness work, some big stuff. But I also can look and see the things that he taught me that live in me today. And one of those was this idea of continuing to learn and continuing to try new things. From the time I was a little child until an adult, he would always challenge me and challenge my brother and my sister to keep learning, to keep growing. I ask you just to do a quick check inside of yourself. When's the last time you tried learning something completely new? And if it's recent, good for you. But if it's not, be willing to stretch in that way. We live for all the challenges that we might feel exist in the world today. Simultaneously, we also live in incredibly exciting times. Do any of you feel that way? Exciting times. Knowledge is literally at our fingertips, on our phones and our keyboards. Whether it is through podcasts or how many of our top universities in our country now make available some of their courses online for us completely free. And the cool part is you don't have to take it for a grade. You don't have to turn in an assignment if you don't want to. You can just learn for the sake what? Of learning and growing. And I don't remember the research, but I know that there is research being done today about how important it is, especially as we get older, for our mental health and our physical and emotional health and well-being to continue to be learning. And just because we might have quite a few candles on our birthday cake does not mean there's not so much more for us to learn. And it almost doesn't matter what the subject is. Just put yourself into something new that you haven't done before. The third is when we get serious and focused about our work, about our path. When we get serious and focused about it. Serious and focused about our path and about our work. I love this story of a little boy who was about 7 or 8 years old. And he was having a really difficult time with math. He just couldn't get it. And his parents were getting worried and concerned, and it didn't seem like he was applying himself very, very much. So they pulled him out of public school, and they put him in parochial school. They figured maybe the nuns could work their magic on him. All that discipline and that focus. And they started to notice some changes in their son. He was bringing homework home, and he was doing it. And he was studying. And he actually got an A on the very first test he took. His parents were thrilled. And his parents said, "What are the teachers doing?" And their son said, "Mom, the teachers aren't doing anything, but I took one look at that guy that they have hanging on the plus sign in the front of the room, and I knew they meant business about math." Now, I don't recommend fear as the way of staying focused. I love that story. I don't recommend fear as a way of staying focused, but sometimes it does work. Sometimes it does work. Sometimes it does work. The idea is, can you bring a little more focus, a little more discipline into your life? Some of you come by it naturally and easily, and some not so much so. But I do know that life seems to work better in terms of our success and joy and purpose when we can be a little more directed, a little more focused. I have in my office a beautiful crystal piece that a board member got me many, many years ago. And it is the image of a cheetah. And the reason the board member got this for me is he remembered me talking about the cheetah, and that the cheetah is one of the fastest, if not the fastest animal on the planet, can be clocked as much as 70 miles an hour when it is on a chase for its dinner. The interesting thing about the cheetah, fast, and very, very focused. It is so focused that when it finally locks in on its prey and starts to run as fast as it can to get it, a slower animal crossing its path will not deter that cheetah. It is so locked on to what is its goal. I think of Peter getting out of the boat when Jesus said to him, "Come, Peter, walk to me." And the story goes that Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water toward Jesus, and he was okay the first step or two when he kept his attention on what? On Jesus. Why did he fall? Why did he sink? Do you remember? Because he started to be more aware of the wind and the waves. More aware of the wind and the waves. We need to be more focused in our lives if we want to be more successful in whatever that looks like for us, in our relationships, in our finances, in our career, to be more focused. The fourth turning point comes when we work on what's before us. What is the next step before us? You've heard me say this on many occasions. We want too much to be able to see all of the steps in our journey before we get ready to take that first step. As metaphysicians, sometimes we are overread, as Eric Butterworth used to say, and very underdone. And I say it's time for many of us to get up off our affirmations. Right? To get up off our affirmations. There comes a time when the study of truth only proves itself in the application of truth. When the study of truth only proves itself in the application of truth. What's your next right step before you? You don't have to know all of them. When we decided to homeschool our kids, we had no idea how long we would do it. But I do remember being kind of ribbed and ridiculed a little bit when our kids were very little, and we would be asked, "Aren't you worried about calculus? Aren't you worried about sports? Aren't you worried about the prom?" And I used to feel so defensive inside. And then one day I blurted out, I said, "He's only in first grade. I think I have time. Calculus is a little ways off," right? We don't have to know all of the steps. We often use that as a what? Excuse for not starting. If you want to know where your faith is, it is, are you willing to do the thing that's right before you? Because if you're not willing to do the piece right before you, guess what? You're not going to get the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth. You get that when you do the first. The fifth is when we are willing to accept incremental improvement. Think about that for a moment. When we're willing to accept incremental improvement. If we're honest, how do we want to improve? Leaps and bounds. We don't even want to start. We want to be at the ending point. At least some of us do, right? I want to know how to do it as soon as I sit down. Incremental steps. That sounds so boring. Boy, we're on the same page. It sounds boring, or it's unglamorous. There's nothing sexy about it. Incremental change. How many of you saw the video clip of Simone Biles, the gymnast, 5-time Olympic medalist, 14-time world champion, do a historic, I have to read it, historic double twist, double somersault dismount. Did you see it? If you did not see it, Google it, not right now. Google it when you leave and watch it. It is breathtaking. When I see kids do feats like that, I go, where is their mother? The part of me that's afraid for them getting hurt goes, where's their mother? And then the part of me that is the coach goes, oh my gosh, that is astounding. But as I watched her, and I must have watched it 3 or 4 times, and was so taken by her strength and her power, but I thought, you know what? I would have loved to have also seen all the incremental tweaks along the way. How many, 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 many times did she attempt that and not land it? How many times did her coach say, make this tiny little adjustment here? I remember from my skating days, my coach saying, you got to drop your shoulder a quarter of an inch. A quarter of an inch? You know, tiny incremental changes. And then we get to see the end product, right? And so we get pulled into that, forgetting that that level of excellence happens over time with a heck of a lot of practice and the willingness for incremental improvement, and knowing that that incremental improvement sometimes means it might be 2 steps forward and 1 step back and 1 step back. The 6th turning point is when we stop comparing ourselves to others. When we stop comparing ourselves to others. Maybe that becomes a little easier when you get older, I don't know. I think John and I have tried with our kids to encourage them not to compare themselves to others, and if there's going to be any comparison, to compare themselves to how they are now, to how they were maybe a year ago. But I know that there was a period for me in ministry where I would look at my colleagues and I would hear and see how they would deliver a lesson. And most of them, many of them, wouldn't have a note binder. Many of them would not prepare weeks and weeks in advance. And I'd look at them and I think, why don't I do it that way? And I would try to step into it. One of the funniest, those of you in San Diego who have visited our other New Thought churches, how many of you know Christian Sorensen? Christian and I are friends. When I watched him, he's got such a different energy and style. And I thought, oh, maybe that's what I need to do more of. I could not do Christian any more than Christian could do me. Comparison kills our authenticity. It kills our authenticity. We've got to know who we are and how we are and make peace with that. Doesn't mean we don't still stretch ourselves into growing. We do. But we grow from who we are and where we are, not trying to be like someone else. Does that make sense? It's a lot more joyful when we stop trying to be like someone else and we try to be our very best version of ourselves. 7th turning point, and I think I will get to all 8, is when we refuse to surrender our attitude to circumstances. Take that one in for a moment. When we refuse to surrender our attitude to circumstances. Circumstances can be pretty dismal, can't they? Circumstances can be very hard. Circumstances can be frightening. Circumstances can be very unfamiliar. Whatever they are, they are. It's up to us whether we're going to surrender our attitude to those circumstances or not. I remember reading about a little boy who was playing baseball. He was in Little League. And he was in the dugout waiting for his turn. And there was an adult who started talking to him and asked him how he was doing and what the score was. And the little boy said, it's 18-0. And the adult said, boy, aren't you discouraged? The little boy said, no, we haven't even been up to bat yet. I want to be like that. I want to be like that. I want to have that kind of ignorance. Let me tell you, it worked. You wouldn't be sitting here if I knew everything that was involved in being a minister and starting a church from nothing. If anybody had told me what it really was, I wouldn't have done it, and you wouldn't be here. You would be somewhere else. You would be somewhere else. Do not surrender your attitude to circumstances. You can be like one of two salesmen. I've been told this is a true story. There was a company, this is many years ago, who wanted to open up a territory in some part of Africa selling shoes. And so the company sent a couple of their salespeople there to kind of do a reconnaissance. And one salesperson reported back and said, prospects are dim here, are nil, nobody wears shoes. The other reported back and said, unlimited potential here, nobody wears shoes. You know, who are you more like, right? Who are you? Same circumstances, right? Both of them were in the same set of circumstances. But one saw it very differently because of their attitude. Because of their attitude. My dad used to say years ago when the church was very small and he would come when we were still meeting in La Jolla and then in Pacific Beach, he would say, Wendy, what it really is, it's not a church, it's an attitude adjustment center. And you know, I think he's kind of right, and I think the Fillmores would agree. And the very last turning point is when we're willing to ask for and accept help. Yeah, when we're willing to ask for and accept help. Jesus asked for help when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. He didn't get the best help. They fell asleep. He asked them, just stay with me and pray. And they didn't do such a good job, his disciples. But he still asked for the help that he felt he needed. I remember in the very early days of starting this church that I sought out the wisdom of those ministers who I could look at and see they were doing good work. And I wanted to know, and I was willing to pay them, and I did. Tell me what you're doing. Teach me. I'm a sponge. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to learn. Wherever you are in your life, whatever's important to you. Maybe you're struggling in your relationships right now, or it's something financially for you, or it's just your work. Whatever it is, there's somebody who's further along in that than you are. Would you not agree? There's always somebody who's further along than we are. Seek them out. It doesn't have to be many. Find one person that you can reach out to and say, can I talk to you for an hour? Maybe they'd even be willing to take you under their wing and mentor you a bit. We're not meant to do this alone. And one of the things that I have found is those people who know what they're doing in whatever field we're talking about, most of the time, if you are very sincere and patient in asking them for some help, they are more than willing to give it to you. A few of my colleagues and I who lead some of the largest New Thought churches, and the Unity Center is one of our largest New Thought churches, have shared with each other how surprised we are, how seldom people reach out to us and say, what are you doing that's working? Because I'm really struggling. I'll tell you this, that every time one of our colleagues reaches out to us, though, we wholeheartedly say, here's what we think is working, and here's where we've messed up. If we're really sincere about making the world a better place for everyone, leaving no one and nothing behind, then we are willing to share what we have learned with those who are asking to learn from us. So quickly in recapping, the turning points I've shared with you are these. Turning points to living more successfully and joyfully and purposefully. When we're willing to make mistakes and get up each and every time we fall. When we keep learning and trying new things. When we get serious and focused about our work, our path, our life. When we work on what's before us, the very next step that is ours to take. When we're willing to accept incremental improvement. When we stop comparing ourselves to others or trying to be like someone else. When we refuse to surrender our attitude to circumstances, and when we are willing to ask for help. Namaste.